Watching news at Prime, and we continue with our focus on the National Prosecuting Authority. This is after calls for reforms, particularly in the appointment of the next NDPP, the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. Its Executive Director is Lawson Naidoo, who joins us now. Mr. Naidoo, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. I know that you were listening into the conversation with Anne Bernstein from the CDE. And let's start with the call for a retired judge who is, well, at least they are calling for that person to assess the structure of the NPA, its leadership and performance. Do you think that that call is an important one? And if you do support it, tell us why.
Good evening, Collie, and thank you very much for this. Look, I would think it's a little premature to make such a call. I don't think, the NPA is in such a state of crisis that it necessarily needs an intervention of that nature. We don't have enough information. Proposals are being based on the basis of rumor and suspicion. As you pointed out in the interview, Advocate Batoy did indicate that there are problems within the NPA, that they need to be discussed with the executive authority, both with the Minister of Justice as well as with the President. And if upon their counsel and advice, it is deemed necessary that an investigation of some sort needs to take place in order to deal with those things, and I think we can consider it then. But I don't think that the situation in the NPA is of such a crisis, as some say, that it warrants that at this point in time. Yeah. A lot of the criticism, Collie, has come about because of some of these cases that have been lost. The Nulani case in particular, which has now been overturned by the Supreme Court of Appeal. We know the Omotozo case is going to go on appeal. Similarly, with the matter of Ms. Jolota in the Free State case, may well go on appeal. So it's not unusual for the NPA to lose cases, and we must be careful not to overreact.
But I do think, though, Mr. Naidoo, that there surely is cause for alarm, and I'm using these words very decidedly, when the NPA head is going to come onto an interview and say the institution is infiltrated by people who have no interests of the prosecutorial independence. And what makes it worse is that she is having sleepless nights about this. But then, when I guess she realizes that this is catching wind, it's catching fire, and it's going to make certain people uncomfortable, she walks back her words. Why am I painting this context? Anne Bernstein points to a struggle to prosecute these major cases. She also mentions that a former ANC Treasurer General mentioned in a panel discussion she was involved in that 91 ANC people who were named in the Zondo Commission, they walking scot-free. Surely there is cause for concern there, isn't there?
Look, I mean, I think there is some cause for concern. There's no point in anybody denying that. But I think, this is, as I said earlier, it's, exaggerating the problem such as it may exist within the NPA. And I think we need to, to understand how prosecution processes operate, that you cannot simply take the information that was presented at the Zondo Commission, for example, present that in court and hope to secure a conviction. The NPA needs to conduct its own investigations. It needs to corroborate the information and evidence that is available before it can bring a matter before court. Now, I think we're all frustrated at the slow pace, but we must also not underestimate the level of dysfunction of the NPA during the state capture era. It was totally hollowed out. And, even though Advocate Batoy has walked back on the comments about the infiltration, I mean, I think it's clear that there are people in the NPA who may not be willing to prosecute without fear, favor, or prejudice, as the Constitution requires them to do. and that necessary steps need to be taken against those people. And if Advocate Batoy has such evidence as she does in the case of the, or such a belief as in the case of the Gauteng DPP, Advocate Chauke, she has brought it, as Anne Bernstein mentioned, to the attention of the president. Yeah. And it's up to the executive then to act, because we must be cognizant also of the fact that the president appoints the top 14 managers in the NPA, not just the NDPP, not just the deputy national directors of public prosecutions, but all 9 DPPs in the provinces. So that, that's a huge power that rests with the president. So the NDPP has to work hand in hand, in tandem with the president to deal with some of these issues that she has highlighted.
But wouldn't this inquiry then, that is being proposed and that would be headed by a judge, Mr. Naidoo, help with this? Exactly what you've just mentioned, that the directors of public prosecutions, all 9, are appointed by the president. Yes, he may have taken a different way altogether in appointing the head of the NDPP, Shamila Batoy, which process was lauded, by the way, at the time. So, but it would appear the power still rests with the president. Look at the example that Anne Bernstein brings to mind, and that is that one of the directors was Shamila Batoy writes to the president and says, this person has actually got to be suspended. That person or that decision has yet to come from the president. A response has yet to come from the president. The Zondo archive, still there is a struggle for the NPA to get that for themselves so that they can actually work with it. Aren't those logjams the things that are meant to be unlocked? And wouldn't this help?
There are a few points to make, Dolly. First, if we cast our mind back, I think it was in 2014, then retired Justice Zaki Yaqub from the Constitutional Court conducted an investigation into the NPA. He unfortunately did not have powers of summons or subpoena, so was not able to access all of the information available. That, remember, as was in the era of state capture. So these things don't always provide a magic wand to resolve issues. In the case of the DPP in Gauteng, of course, I'm sure we would all like the president to have acted more quickly in dealing with that. He hasn't acted yet, and pressure needs to be put on the president to do that. The appointment process is set out in the Constitution. The president, acting in his capacity as head of the national executive, appoints the NDPP. The last time he followed a more open, competitive and consultative process with the panel that was established then. We certainly hope that a similar process will be followed now. I would agree with Anne that it needs to be done as a matter of urgency because Advocate Batoy leaves early next year. And ideally, we want to have a situation where there is a smooth handover, a smooth and structured transition to the next person. So the progress that has been made under Advocate Batoy's leadership is not lost, and the next person that comes in can effectively hit the ground running and continue the rehabilitation of the NPA.
Final question. Advocate Batoy leaves early next year, as you mentioned. In fact, if my information is correct, I think it's January next year. So in all possibility, she may not come back after the December holidays. But that aside, there are those who are saying an inquiry, a commission of inquiry must be instituted against her fitness to hold office. I think that comes from the MK benches in Parliament. If that succeeds, at least the call to debate that, do you think that it's a justifiable call that so close to retirement, an inquiry into her fitness to hold office would possibly be something that is considered?
Well, the question that would need to be asked there would be, what would be the purpose and aim of such a process? I certainly don't believe that an inquiry into the fitness of Advocate Batoy is necessary. Even if it were, with the time left, such an inquiry would not be completed by January next year. We know that. So I think those are self-serving calls for a head, as it were. But I also want to come back to one other point you mentioned earlier, which was the issue of the access to the Zondo archives.
Yeah.
That has been a problem in the past. My understanding is that there is now a working relationship between the NPA and in particular the Investigating Directorate and the Department of Justice to grant them access to those archives and records so that they can do their work. So I think we must also not be misled that problems that did exist before are still prevalent.
Lawson Naidoo, thank you as always for your time. He is the Executive Director at the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution.